네. 안녕하세요. 방금 소개받은 고려대학교의 권대봉 교수입니다. Well, thank you for your introduction. My name is DB Kwon. DB stands for database. Well, in that way you can remember me. Yeah? It used to be DB was developing boy. Do you think still I am developing? Well, first of all, I thank you for your participation in this track C. You know that C is very important alphabet. C stands for creativity. C stands for change. So today we will talk about change, how to cooperate between countries and within countries. So we will hear from Dr. Ji-Peng Tan and Brigadier Thoman, and then we will have 3 discussions here. So let me introduce Dr. Ji-Peng Tan. I think I met you in Washington, D.C. I met you in Singapore. Again, I met you in Seoul. Yeah. Well, I remember she got her bachelor's degree from London and a doctoral degree from Princeton University in the United States. Well, she is working for the World Bank. So I may expect that she will talk about workforce development strategy for international cooperation from the perspective of World Bank, because she has world view. Am I right? Okay. Why don't you join me in welcoming Dr. Ji-Peng Tan.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome. I'm very pleased to be here to present to you some thoughts on workforce development work that's done at the World Bank. And I'm going to talk about some recent initiatives that we've taken at the World Bank. And the next slide just shows you what I'm going to cover in this session. Just an overview, and then I'm going to go into a bit more detail on one of the initiatives that I am doing work on. And I'm very happy to see in the audience some colleagues from KRIVET with whom I'm also collaborating on this project. Let me begin then with a very obvious statement that skills matter. In 2008, the Commission on Growth and Development published an important report known as the Growth Report. In it, you will find a statement that investments in health, knowledge, and the skills of the people are as important as investments in the more visible physical capital of the country. So for countries, skills matter. And within countries, we know that research shows that firms are interested in having a skilled workforce, particularly if they are in a competitive business. And that individuals with more and better skills can find work more easily, and they earn more as well. I think in this conference, those statements do not need much defense. So we find that in both developed and developing countries, there is now increased focus on skills and investments required to prepare a workforce fit for the 21st century. Now, at the World Bank, obviously, we are dealing with countries that are much less developed than Korea and the developed countries, OECD countries. We've heard a lot about that. So what does the World Bank bring to the table when we talk about supporting skills development? We bring three things. One is knowledge, and we put a lot of premium on this because we are a global institution, and we ought to be mobilizing global knowledge to inform our dialogue with countries, and certainly our funding is really a drop in the ocean compared to what governments themselves spend. But we hope that the combination of these three things will help us to assist countries in achieving better outcomes. And in today's talk, I'm going to focus on the first of these, the knowledge piece of the action. And there are three types of knowledge gaps that I'd like to mention. The World Bank invests a lot in building up our knowledge about skills, and we have recently completed a number of important country-specific as well as regional flagship studies. And yet we are aware of important gaps which leave unanswered some fundamental questions, such as the following. Who lacks skills and why? What skills are in short supply? Cognitive, non-cognitive, and technical skills? And for what jobs? And how best to acquire these skills? What can be done about skills gaps and mismatches? So we feel that we are still in need of effort to deepen our knowledge. Now, we have started a few initiatives to address the gaps in our knowledge in each of these areas. One is a multi-country study to measure skills more systematically and in an internationally comparable way. And we are going to launch data collection starting in January 2012. And we are collaborating very closely with the OECD's project, which some of you may know by its acronym, PIAC. We also have a scaled-up program of impact evaluation on interventions to improve skills, employment, and productivity. And finally, a new program we have started to focus on our knowledge gap in the area of policy design. So I shall devote the rest of my presentation on this last initiative on policy design. The initiative is known by its acronym SABER, S-A-B-E-R, which stands for System Assessment and Benchmarking for Education Results. Now just some highlights. The objective is to help countries systematically examine and strengthen system performance. And the approach is to develop diagnostic tools with cooperation of partners. And I'm glad to say that in this work, we cooperate with Korea, among other governments. And the second piece of it is to benchmark against evidence-based global standards and best practice. Now, I'm glad to say that of the 17 policy domains covered in SABER, workforce development is one of them, and I shall use the remaining time to talk about our work in this area. First, some definitions. Workforce development refers to the education, employment, and job training efforts designed to help employers get a skilled workforce, as well as to help individuals succeed in the workplace. So a workforce development system must fulfill two enabling functions simultaneously. On the supply side, for individuals to acquire job-relevant skills, and on the demand side, for employers to communicate and meet their skills needs. The challenge for policymakers is to design policies to help harmonize these two functions so that you have a balance between the supply and demand sides of the equation. Then in practice, workforce development systems in developing countries face challenges of pervasive skills gaps and mismatches. And we see this in the data, for example, in enterprise surveys. It's not surprising given the number of actors involved, the individuals, employers, training providers, and public officials. There are many potential sources of market and government failures. And if you take firms and individuals, they may invest too little despite high returns or invest in the wrong kinds of training. And the reasons are well known. Some of them I will just quickly mention: skills constraints, inadequate information or myopia, uncertainty, externalities, and labor market imperfections. The behavior of training providers often adds to the misalignment of skill supply and demand. Poor regulation, weak governance are common reasons. And then imperfections in government itself is also a factor, reflecting weak linkages, poor coordination, duplication of effort, inconsistency of purpose across ministries and agencies involved. Now, SessionⅢ WFD seeks to benchmark how well a country's policies and practices are helping to overcome these potential sources of market and government failure. So the issues are really complex, and we try to bring some order to the picture by clustering the issues around three broad policy domains. Dimension one, the strategic framework which sets the direction for workforce development in alignment with national economic goals. Dimension two refers to oversight and quality assurance arrangements which guide the stewardship of the system, the whole system. And then dimension three refers to the service delivery system which produces outcomes on the ground. The three dimensions are obviously interrelated. The strategic framework empowers the relevant authorities to exercise stewardship through the design of governance and incentive structures. And these structures define the operational context for individuals, firms, and training providers, both public and private. And then the behavior of these actors determines outcomes on the ground. And outcomes, in turn, should provide feedback to close the policy-making loop. Then we find that we need to drill down for each dimension to the policy goals and actions. So for example, under the strategic framework, we have three policy goals relating respectively to strategic direction, priorities, and coordination. And for each of these policy goals, we further define a set of three actions. So the structure for the other two dimensions listed here for system oversight and service delivery follows the same logic. So taking the three dimensions together, we would have an analytical framework with a grand total of 9 policy goals and 27 policy actions. So I won't have time to go into more detail about this analytical framework, just to say that it is intended to help us examine systematically policies that countries might use to overcome market and government failure in workforce development. So we follow a very simple process for implementing the analysis. First, we create data collection instrument, and that we have already done. And we are in the process of collecting data, quite near completion too. And then we score the data to benchmark policies and use the results to inform policy dialogue. Now, the countries that I'm going to list, some of them we are actually not in dialogue with them because they are not really the low-income countries, but you see the reason why we've included them. But one of them is a low-income country, and we are in the process of setting up with them a process for policy dialogue. So these are the countries. You see that we have chosen some developed countries, such as Ireland, Korea, and Singapore, to see how their policies have evolved over time. And we've included Chile and Uganda to test the feasibility of our tool in middle and low-income countries. Now, before I share the results of early results from our work, I'd like to just put on this slide to show the rubrics for benchmarking. We define 4 stages of development, and 1 for latent level for a situation of limited policy engagement. 2, which is emerging, for a situation marked by occasional good practice. 3, for established level of performance, for a situation of systemic good practices, albeit with occasional gaps. and 4 for a situation of systemic good practices that match international standards. So those are our rubrics. Now for some tentative results. I say tentative because we are still validating the data, but I want to show it to you to illustrate what we can do with the benchmarking tool. So this is data for Uganda for 2011, and I'm showing on this chart the results for the first dimension. And you see there's a dial, a blue dial on the top right-hand corner. It shows that for dimension 1 on strategic framework, the score is a 2, which means an emerging level of performance. Now, this outcome is an aggregation of the scores for the 3 underlying policy goals, which are shown on the 3 horizontal lines with a red dot on the line. So goal 1 on articulating a strategic direction for workforce development comes in reasonably high, between a 2, which is emerging, and a 3 for established. Now, there are data underlying that, which leads us to put the score at that level. For goal 2, which is on prioritizing a demand-driven approach to workforce development, it comes in low, close to a latent level of performance. And for goal 3, which is on strengthening critical coordination for workforce development, it comes in slightly higher than a 2. An emerging level of performance. Now, if we step back, we can see that in terms of the strategic framework, the area of particular weakness in this case is in fostering a demand-driven approach to workforce development. Now, I'm going to show you another slide which puts all our results on one page, actually, covering all the 9 policy goals that I mentioned in our analytical framework. And the text is probably too small for you to read, but all I want to let you draw to your attention is that with this kind of scoring system, very quickly you see that the main area of weakness in the system is in the service delivery part of the system. Slightly better for system oversight. And then, you know, in the strategic framework, 2 parts are doing, you know, significantly better than the other 2 dimensions. And you can very quickly see that it could be a very useful opener for a conversation with our national counterparts on where we might begin to focus our effort in developing the system, in drilling a little bit more into the impediments for improvement. Now I'd like to show you another slide which illustrates why we have included some developed countries in our sample. This is data for Ireland. Again, I'd like to caution that these data are very early results. We are still to validate them. But the 3 dials at the top, the purple dial is for 1980, the yellow for 1990, and the red for 2000. So we've benchmarked the policies over a period of 20 years, and you can see the movement in the dial. Now, if you look down on the first line, you can see the purple dot at 1980, and that's for articulating a strategic direction for workforce development. Started quite low at a 2, and by 2000 it was close to a 4. Similar thing happened on prioritizing a demand-driven approach. That aspect of the strategic framework has seen a very quick and dramatic, well, it's not quick, but it's a dramatic improvement over time. And for strengthening critical coordination, the country was already scoring well. They were coordinating among the different parties quite well, and we didn't see much of a movement in the 20 years. Now, these data for both Ireland and Uganda were collected by people in the field. what we call a principal investigator who knows about the country and its system. We're doing the same thing for Korea, and I'm so glad to say that for Korea, some researchers at KRIVET are helping us with the data collection. Now, with this information, we are going to be refining our work over the coming months, and we hope to increase our sample size. And we have some hypotheses that we might begin to think about, that we think that weak links undermine outcomes in the workforce development system. The weakest link probably determines how well the whole system performs. A second hypothesis is that some links are more damaging than others, and hence the need to prioritize and sequence reforms. And finally, it's important to learn by and from doing. So fixing the weak links cannot rely on buying reforms off the shelf. We cannot say that it works well in Germany or in Switzerland or in Korea, and therefore we'll import this into our system. I think it's very important for countries to learn to do and then to do to learn. So this back and forth learning and doing is very, very important. So those are the hypotheses that we hope that our work could help us to conform or reshape. So the next steps for our project, we have 5 country studies. We'll complete them by 2012, hopefully in the next few months. And we'll have second generation applications in different countries using a revised and improved version of the data collection instrument. And we'll continue to provide ongoing capacity development through collaboration with national teams on this work. So I'd like to end here my presentation just to note that, to remind everyone that the work that we are doing on benchmarking workforce development is one piece of our effort to improve knowledge at the World Bank. It's part of our knowledge agenda on skills, and we have the other 2 pieces which have to do with skills measurement and impact evaluation. So the 3 pieces together hopefully will combine and give us a much better way to support our partner countries in creating a workforce for them suitable to their context that's fitting the countries with a workforce for the 21st century. Thank you very much.
Dr. Daebong Tang, thank you so much for your sharing the very strategic framework. Yeah? Well, next speaker is Proud Thoman from BIBB. BIBB is a Federal Institute for Vocational Education and Training in Germany. She is head of Department for Cross-Sectional Tasks, Communication, International Vocational Education and Training. Please join me in welcoming Proud Thoman.
Dear Chairman, Professor Kwon, ladies and gentlemen, may I first begin by thanking you for the invitation. It gives me great pleasure to attend this forum and to learn about your country's vision to become a powerhouse of talents. As Professor Kwon already mentioned, my name is Birgit Thoman. I'm head of department in the Federal Institute for Vocational Education and Training, called BIBB in Germany. It's the National Center of Competence for Research on and Development of VET in Germany. And we are very proud to have a strong and very vivid cooperation relationship with the Korean Research Institute for VET, the KRIVET. As we learned yesterday by Minister Lee, Korea is well aware of its human talents and strives to include all of them on its way towards becoming the powerhouse of talents. This gives specific importance to VET. In times of globalizations, these talents need to be trained for a labor market that requires on all levels, not only amongst the elite, the ability to cooperate and collaborate internationally. As there are quite a number of similarities between Korea and Germany, the demographic situation, the lack of natural resources, I hope that my focus on Germany will be of additional interest to you. So just sorry, I just have to, okay, all these pages. In the following 20 minutes, I would like to outline what experience we have made in the process of internationalizing VET in Germany and where further action is still needed. I intend to show why internationalization in VET is necessary, what exactly do I understand when using the term international competences, how can they be fostered, and what challenges are still lying ahead. As an export-oriented nation without huge reserves of raw materials, but with 9 neighboring countries and positioned at the heart of Europe, Germany has a special interest in the European and international orientation of VET. New markets and opportunities are opening up thanks to globalization of the economy and society. According to a study from the year 2007, almost 3/4 of German companies operate internationally, either within or outside the EU. German industry generates more than 40% of total revenues abroad, with the automotive, aerospace, chemical, pharmaceutical, and mechanical engineering sectors leading the way. For small and medium-sized enterprises too, activities abroad are continuously growing in importance. For this reason, companies, both large firms as well as SMEs, have seen a noticeable rise in demand for employees with international and intercultural competences at all levels since the years 1990s, and growing numbers of workplaces expect staff to encourage in cross-border mobility or cooperation in international teams. At the same time, HRD faces new challenges. Awareness of our growing interdependency with other countries is changing the world of work and posing new requirements for the qualification of skilled employees and managers. In the international context, competitive advantages are no longer defined by the qualities of the distributed products only, but more and more by the quality of staff and their communication. This is where more and other competences than mainly a very skilled command of the business partner's language are required. In regard to qualifications requested from staff operating at an international level, you find various concepts in research and literature, including ICT skills as becoming more relevant in a virtually globalized world since the end of the 1990s. Giving tribute to the lead principle of German's VET system, the occupational competence, what we call in Germany occupational competence, and which is the overall goal to be acquired during initial and continuing VET, I would like to make you familiar with the concept of international occupational competence that has been developed at the University of Jena. In this model, international occupational competence derives from professional, social, and personal competence, as well as strategic competence, including methodological and networking skills. Intercultural competence is understood in this model not as an additional subdimension, but as a reference dimension for occupational competence that interacts with the 4 other competences in order to develop a comprehensive international occupational competence. Companies' needs for qualifications geared towards internationalization are no longer confined exclusively to management level. Strategies for human resource management at skilled worker level are also called for. On the evidence of a survey by the Cologne Institute for Economic Research, dated already from the year 2000, international occupational competence was required by a growing number of skilled workers. In particular, the foremost need was for work-related foreign languages, as you see on the slide, followed by the international professional knowledge. Different work areas varied considerably in the proportion of employees who regularly made use of international qualifications. Whereas 40% of IT workers and 28% of employees in commercial fields made constant use of work-related foreign language skills, in technical occupations, the figure was only 1 in 5. But as during the last 10 years, international business contacts become more and more relevant to all levels of the economy, to global players as well as to SMEs, employees need to be qualified for this growing relevance. Hence, what has been already done to foster international occupational competence in Germany? Aspect 1, in regard to the idea of change by exchange, different programs to promote mobility were launched on a national as well as on a European level. For instance, through the National Agencies for Education for Europe, the European Commission promotes transnational mobility, internationalization of VAT, and the transparency and transferability of qualifications. The European program Leonardo da Vinci, for instance, aims to promote the quality and effectiveness of that system in EU member states. An essential component are exchange and transnational mobility measures, for example, in the form of vocational study visits abroad and Europe-wide work experience placements for people in initial and continuing vocational education and training. A growing number of young people are now taking advantage of this provision. In the year 2009, 23,500 young people from Germany spent periods of their initial vocational training abroad. You see, there is still room for improvement. So far, only 3% of all apprentices and vocational school students are making use of the opportunity to complete part of their initial vocational training abroad. But there is a strong political will throughout the EU to increase this proportion to at least 6 to 10% by 2020. For Germany, 6% would mean a further increase of approximately 30,000 young people. To achieve this benchmark, various supporting measures were initiated, such as the Mobility Advisors Project launched in 2009 by the Federal Ministry of Labor, the German Association of Chambers of Industry and Commerce, and the German Confederation of Skilled Crafts. Their objective is to advise companies on enabling far greater numbers of trainees and junior employees to gain occupational experience. The growing significance given to internationalization of VAT by the German government, as well as by the social partners, was also reflected in the reform of the German Vocational Training Act in 2005. In this act, provision was made for parts of initial vocational training to be completed abroad. These phases may account for up to 1/4 of the overall duration of training. That means up to 9 months, for instance, of a 3-year program of initial vocational training can be spent in a host company abroad. And as this adds additional challenge to the cooperation of learning venues, for any stay longer or lasting longer than 4 weeks, a plan for the learning outcome during this period must be developed and agreed in consultation. Just to show you this short information on how the dual system in Germany works. So it's called a dual system because it's described by the 2 learning venues, companies on the one hand and part-time vocational schools. And with the additional learning venue in a company abroad, of course there will be a more complex situation to handle. So the Vocational Training Act provides legal reference in order to integrate these practical phases abroad into initial vocational training. Not only is the content coordinated with company-based training plans, but furthermore, it can also be documented using instruments like the Europass Mobility that proves learning and work experience in Europe to future employers. Second aspect, numerous companies have already embarked on the route towards international HR development themselves and are supporting the acquisition of international occupational competence with their own qualification programs as part of in-house initial vocational training. The first level instrument most often used by companies is to involve trainees in providing hospitality to foreign partners or customers. Large companies and corporate groups like, for instance, Daimler, Deutsche Bahn, the German railway company and others, which has a high degree of internationalization and highly organized initial vocational training, see the bottom right box on the diagram. They emphasize exchange programs at an early stage in initial VET, involving trainees in international projects and training through transnational training groups. At Deutsche Bahn, for instance, trainees complete part-time vocational school and company-based phases in several locations and several international locations. By promoting work experience placements abroad, companies expect to benefit more from self-reliant and motivated employees who develop a strong identification with their own company and who have learned to operate in global contexts, to break down organizational blindness, to contribute new insights to the company, and to play their part in improving the company's market position. For companies then, placements abroad are a tried and tested method of testing the resilience and developing the potential of employees. Large corporations and global players have elaborate programs to prepare skilled workers for secondment abroad and flanking measures to support them and their families. Third aspect, internationalization of VET cannot be achieved without embedding international competences in standard initial vocational curricula and training regulations. This next slide illustrates the scopes of skills and expertise needed. As you see, globalization and internationalization impose new requirements also upon the design of occupations. To ensure that German dual training remains internationally compatible, curricula and training regulations become increasingly competence-oriented in design. The Innovation Circle on Vocational Education, set up by Federal Education Minister Chavan, recommended already back in 2007 the internationalization of general training plans and further training regulations, the systematic training of instructors, and the inclusion of European or international qualifications in initial and continuing VET. In the meantime, a consensus has been established among the social partners to take account of international competences in the procedure for revising training regulations. Given that more than 350 recognized occupations now exist in Germany, however, this can only be implemented gradually, whenever it becomes necessary to draft a new training regulation or modernize an existing one. The following slide will show to you how the acquisition of international competences is covered in 3 selected examples, representing somehow the broad range of initial vocational training programs. The scope and the depth vary depending on the particular occupational profile. Pioneers in this respect are certainly the commercial occupations in wholesale and foreign trade, which exhibit the greatest proportion of international training content due to the nature of their occupations. Since the self-concept and the specification profile of the instructors is another essential lever, international competences were also included in the reform of the Ordinance on Trainer Aptitude in 2009. This ordinance is a core instrument of a quality assurance in company-based initial vocational training and in the qualification of VET staff. Within the delivery of initial vocational training, trainers are required to encourage intercultural competences and the social and personal development of trainees. By this reform, it is required from in-company trainers to rise to the challenge of delivering training in international or cross-cultural contexts. VET trainers can participate as important stakeholders also in exchange programs, study visits, or are provided with courses on intercultural learning and work-related foreign languages. Coming to the end of my presentation, I won't miss to underline that the embedding of international competences in VET presents an opportunities for trainees and trainers coming from a migration background. In how far? Because it gives them the opportunity to harness the value of their intercultural key competences and foreign language skills, which were often being acquired in informal settings. It is my strong belief that the German education system shall continue to make use of these existing or comparatively easily to be developed international skills and bring out their potential systematically. Let me say in conclusion, the internationalization of VET is already an important and increasingly significant field in the modernization of initial and continuing VET. Internationalization of company-based training and HR development can be observed in companies already and will be further reinforced also by making use of e-media forms of distance learning and virtual collaboration. Company staff development and recruitment strategies will be oriented even more strongly towards internationalized qualification profiles. And the internationalization will become part of the corporate identity of all companies, including small and medium-sized enterprises. Hand in hand with the growing demand of business and industry, there is an awareness of the increasing relevance of international occupational competence. Perhaps this will result one day in an additional qualification in Germany called international occupational competence. The potential of immigrants has come to be recognized by policymakers and is now promoted through various activities, not only in the context of the 15th anniversary of the first Turkish guest workers arriving in Germany that was celebrated yesterday. In a nutshell, continued effort by all stakeholders and social partners are required in order to make use of existing incentives of internationalization in VET and thus to strengthen the attractiveness of VET in the 21st century, in Germany and beyond. Thank you very much.
Frau Thoman, thank you very much for your sharing German experience in English, not in German, yeah? Well, Dr. Tan's mother tongue is Chinese, and Frau Thoman's mother tongue is German. But both of them, you know, they made a presentation in English. I appreciate so much. 그런데 그 자꾸 영어를 한국말로 통역하니까 반대로 뭐죠? 이 한국말을 영어로 통역하시는 통역사가 심심할 것 같아서 괜찮아요? 한국어 쓰셔도 좋습니다. 여러분들 나중에 그 한국어 쓰시는 게 더 편하신 분들은 한국어 쓰세요. 왜냐하면 이 한쪽 통역이 더 심심할 것 같아요. 우리 그 토론에 들어가기 전에 그 지금 토론은 그 10분 정도로 제한해 주시고 그 오늘 여기 그 사실은 그 BIBB라는 것은 한국의 직업능력개발원 같은 독일의 연방직업능력개발원입니다. 그래서 그 독일의 연방직업능력개발원과 한국직업능력개발원 간의 그 협력, 자매 결연 협력을 설명하신 우리 직업능력개발원 초대 원장님이 오셔서 잠깐 제가 소개를 드리겠습니다. 이무근 초대 원장님 오셨습니다. 예. 네, 감사합니다. 그리고 여기 이 자리에 제가 이 크리벳 원장으로 재직 시에 스위스에 가서 스위스 연방직업능력개발원과 협력 설명을 하고 왔는데 오늘 스위스 연방직업능력개발원의 원장님인 프로페서 스테판 볼터 원장님 모셨습니다. 네, 네. 그리고 이 자리에 그 지금 대한민국이 그 아프리카 국가들과 지금 직업 교육에 관한 그 협력을 하고 있는데 이 자리에 그 아프리카인 그 국가의 5개 국가 그 나미비아, 예. 보츠와나, 잠비아, DR 콩고, 말라위, 여기 그러니까 우리 그 협력할 파트너들이 여기 다 앉아 있습니다. 그리고 이제 월드뱅크에서도 많이 오셨는데 월드뱅크 델리게이션 한번 손 들어봐 주실래요? 월드뱅크. 예. 오케이. 예. 감사합니다. 이렇게 해서 이제 통역도 이렇게 교대로 영어에서 한글로, 한글에서 영어로 이렇게 하는 시간을 가졌습니다. Well, our next, okay. Next discussant is the Dr. Lim Won-hyuk. He is a director, Center for International Development, Korea Development Institute. Well, he earned his BA and PhD from Stanford University. Please welcome him. Yeah.
청중의 90% 정도가 한국이니까 한국말로 하겠습니다. 외국 분들은 양해해 주시기 바랍니다. 우리가 보통 인력 개발 문제, 직업 능력 개발이나 인력 개발 문제를 얘기를 하면 사람들이 교육이라든가 직업 훈련 이쪽에 초점을 맞춰서 발표를 진행을 하는데 제가 말씀드릴 핵심 내용은 두 가지입니다. 하나는 직업 능력 개발이든 인력 개발이든 효과가 있으려면은 전체적인 사회 환경이 어떤지가 너무나도 중요한 문제라는 것이고, 두 번째가 인력 개발과 관련해서는 특히 산업 무역 정책 쪽과 연계를 해서 생각을 해야지 이것을 단순히 교과 과정을 어떻게 짜고 직업 훈련 프로그램을 어떻게 짜고 하는 문제는 아니라는 겁니다. 그래서 그 두 개가 핵심적인 논지가 되겠고요. 그것을 한국의 경험과 요즘 우리나라에서 국제개발협력 차원에서 추진하고 있는 몇 가지 프로그램을 예로 들면서 소개를 하겠습니다. 그래서 한국의 경험부터 간단하게 소개를 해보면은 흔히들 이제 착각하는 것이 일제 때 교육을 잘 시켰다고 일본이 지배하던 시대에 잘 생각하시는 분들이 있는데, 사실 한국이 일본에서 그 해방됐던 일제에서 해방됐던 1945년도에 문자 해독률은 28%였습니다. 그러니까 그렇게 뭐 보편전 교육이 잘 됐다든가 이런 것이 아니었고요. 하지만은 그 한국은 당시 이제 전 세계에서 최빈국 중에 하나면서도 사람의 투자를 어마어마하게 했습니다. 보편적 교육을 들여오고 해서 60년도에 가면은 그 문자 해독률이 82%가 됩니다. 그러니까 이 부분이 상당히 중요한 것이 어떤 재원보다도 사람에 투자하는 것이 시간이 많이 걸리고 성과를 보기가 어렵습니다. 그래서 뭐 기계를 도입하고 이런 부분들은 물건을 사오면 되지만은 사람에 투자하는 데 시간이 많이 걸리는 이런 문제가 있고요. 근데 그 투자를 한 것도 있었습니다만은 그것이 효과를 내기 위해서는 몇 가지 그 조건이 필요했는데 많은 나라들이 요즘 경험하는 문제들 중에 하나가 교육개혁이나 뭐 직업훈련 개혁을 하더라도 별로 성과가 잘 안 나는 부분이 있습니다. 왜냐하면은 그 교육생들이 교육을 받으면서 이걸 열심히 공부하고 일하면은 뭔가 신분도 상승하고 사회에서 성공할 수 있다 이런 기대감이 있어야 교육을 열심히 받을 텐데 아무리 프로그램을 잘 짜도 졸업한 다음에 그 뭐 신분상의 제약이라든가 여러 가지 어떤 빈부격차라든가 이런 문제들 때문에 신분 상승에 한계가 있다고 생각을 하면은 그렇게 열심히 하지 않습니다. 그래서 한국의 경험에 있어서 사람에 대한 투자도 했습니다만 동시에 중요했던 게 토지 개혁입니다. 토지 개혁과 한국 전쟁으로 인해서 많은 사람들이 이제 피해를 봤습니다만은 결국은 그 전통적인 어떤 신분 체제가 붕괴가 되고 많은 사람들이 그 학습을 하고 교육을 받고 일을 열심히 하면은 신분 상승을 할 수 있게 되겠구나 하는 기대감이 생긴 게 아주 중요합니다. 그래서 우리가 흔히 이제 1950년대에 부패도 심했고 그 잘 살지를 못했기 때문에 어두운 시기를 많이 보죠. 하지만은 그 여러 가지 문제가 있었습니다만은 교육과 사회적 이동성이라는 측면에서는 상당한 진전이 있었던 시대입니다. 그래서 그때 그 인간 개발한 것을 바탕으로 해서 그 60년대부터는 노동집약적 산업에 비교의가 있으니까 그쪽에 이제 본격적으로 투자를 하기 시작했죠. 어떤 말씀이냐면은 소득 수준은 낮은데 교육 수준은 그 소득 수준에 비해서 훨씬 높으니까 60년대 초 상황을 설명을 드리면은 우리나라보다 소득이 한 2배 내지 3배 되는 나라의 교육 수준과 비슷한 수준을 우리가 갖게 된 겁니다. 사람의 투자를 해가지고 그러니까 이제 임금은 낮지만은 그 훈련된 정도라든가 이런 부분들은 교육 수준은 높았기 때문에 노동 집약적인 산업에 상당한 비교의가 있었고 그래서 외국에서 기술을 도입하고 기계를 도입해서 가공해서 수출할 수 있는 전략을 채택한 다음에는 상당히 고도 성장을 하게 된 겁니다. 그런데 그 60년대에는 그렇게 해서 뭐 신발이라든가 섬유라든가 이런 쪽에 발전을 거뒀습니다만은 늘 문제가 됐던 게 국내 부가가치율이었습니다. 그러니까 원료도 수입을 하고 기계도 수입을 하고 결국 그 임금 좀 싼 노동력을 활용을 해서 잘 물건을 만들어서 판다고 하면은 국내에 떨어지는 부가가치는 그렇게 높지가 않기 때문에 그러면 중간재라든가 이런 부분들을 중간재나 자본재를 어떻게 생산할 것인가 그래서 국내 부가가치율을 높일 것이냐 하는 문제가 제기가 됐고 그래서 60년대 말 70년대 초에는 이제 정책의 화두가 어떻게 좀 더 그 산업의 고도화를 이루느냐 중화학공업화 정책을 하느냐 하는 이런 부분이었습니다. 근데 당시 우리 상황은 60년대는 여공들을 중심으로 아까 말씀드린 노동집약적 산업을 일으켰지만은 그 중화학공업이 필요로 하는 숙련도를 가지고 있는 인력은 그렇게 많지가 않았습니다. 그래서 그 직업훈련을 시작을 하지만은 그것이 산업하고 무역정책하고 연계가 돼서 추진이 되는데요. 예를 들어서 그때 그 정책을 많이 입안하신 오원철 수석 같은 분이 이제 회고하면서 하시는 말씀이 하도 일제 시대 때도 늘 얘기 들었던 게 그 한국 사람들은 좀 성격이 거칠고 끝마무리가 이게 좋지 않고 해서 노동집약적 산업이나 이런 쪽은 뭐 어느 정도 할 수 있지 모르겠지만은 이 기술 정도가 높은 산업 쪽은 아마 어려울 것이다. 얘기를 많이 들었다고 합니다. 그래서 본인 스스로도 정책을 입안했지만 과연 한국이 기계라든가 뭐 선박이라든가 조선산업이라든가 뭐 금속이라든가 화학이라든가 이런 중화학공업에서 성공할 수 있었는지 회의를 가지고 있었다고 하는데요. 그런데 그때 당시에 이제 그 정부에서 추진을 했던 것이 금호공고와 같은 특수화된 이 고등학교를 만들어 가지고 거기에 어떤 식으로 학생들을 뽑았냐면은 중학교 교장 선생님들의 추천을 받아서 전액 장학금을 지급을 하면서 3년 동안 진짜 기술을 익히게 했던 겁니다. 그리고 그와 동시에 직업 훈련 쪽도 강화를 했죠. 하지만 중요한 점은 뭐냐면은 그것만 한 것이 아니라 말씀드린 것처럼 이 중화공업화 정책이라는 큰 틀 안에서 이걸 했다는 겁니다. 그러니까 직업 훈련을 받더라도 이 사람들이 그러면 졸업한 다음에 직업이 있느냐 하는 그 문제가 또 제기되지 않습니까? 그래서 결국은 우리나라의 경험에서 핵심적이었던 거는 그 인간의 사람에 먼저 투자했다는 것도 중요하지만은 그 이후에 기술 숙련도를 높이고 하는 과정에서 단순히 이 문제를 인력 개발 문제를 교육이랑 직업 훈련 문제로 접근하는 것이 아니라 산업과 무역 정책이라는 큰 틀 안에서 같이 접근을 했다는 것이죠. 그래서 이런 경험들을 바탕으로 해서 우리나라가 이제 발전을 해왔고 70년대 80년대 이후에는 이제 민간 기업들의 역량이 강화되면서 민간 기업들이 그 사람에도 투자를 하고 그것을 정부가 어느 정도 지원도 해주고 하는 이런 시스템이 돌아가게 된 것이죠. 하지만 이제는 좀 문제가 우리가 단순히 추격을 하는 차원을 넘어서 이제 스스로 그 혁신을 해야 되고 기술 혁신을 해야 되고 또 뭔가를 새로 창조를 해야 되는 이 단계에 오니까 과거처럼 벤치마킹을 어느 날을 해가지고 거기에 맞춰서 해보자 이렇게 하기는 상당히 어렵다는 것이고요. 지금은 이제 화두가 되는 것이 그 대학교 진학률이 85%가 넘고 이렇게 되면은 과잉 교육하고 있지 않느냐 하는 문제가 있고 과연 그러면 졸업을 한 다음에 어떤 직업들이랑 수요랑 공급을 맞춰야 눈높이를 충족시킬 수 있겠느냐 하는 그런 문제들이 나오고 있죠. 근데 이제는 우리 경제도 상당히 발전됐기 때문에 과거처럼 뭐 중학교업 할 거니까 기능사들을 그리고 엔지니어들을 이렇게 양성하겠다 이런 식으로 접근하기는 상당히 어렵고 이제는 좀 인문학적인 지식도 꽤 많고 폭넓게 공부를 한 다음에 그것을 현실에 어떻게 접목시키냐 하는 그 부분이 상당히 어려워지는 문제인 것 같습니다. 그래서 이제 대학과 기업 간의 관계도 중요합니다만은 뭐 애플에 엔지니어들만 있는 것이 아니듯이 그 학제적인 어떤 학습을 하고 하는 이런 부분들이 점점 중요하게 될 것 같고요. 이와 관련해서 그 우리나라에서는 잘 아시다시피 이제 국제개발 협력 차원에서 정책 자문이라든가 지식 공유라든가 이런 부분들을 많이 해왔습니다. 그래서 그 프로그램을 간략하게만 설명을 드리면은 이와 같은 한국 경험에서 볼 수 있는 것처럼 진짜 그 어떤 사회 발전이 지속적으로 이루어지려면은 그거는 그 나라 자체적인 역량이 강화가 돼야 되는 거고 거기에서 핵심은 사람을 키우는 것이기 때문에 저희가 정책 자문이나 지식 공유를 할 때도 그런 부분들을 강조를 합니다. KDI에서는 KSP라고 Knowledge Sharing Program이라고 그 우리나라의 발전 경험을 공유를 하면서 이같이 개도국이나 체제 전환국이 당면하고 있는 현안에 대해서 자문을 하는 이런 사업들이 전개되고 있는데 예를 들어서 도미니카 공화국 같은 경우에는 저희가 수출 진흥에 대한 정책 자문을 했습니다. 근데 그 중에서 한 부분이 이제 수출 인력 양성에 대한 것이었는데요. 그 부분을 할 때 물론 좀 무역에 대해서 좀 잘 알고 하는 이런 부분들도 중요하지만 교과 과정 설계할 때 그런 부분들도 중요하지만은 더 큰 문제는 어떻게 국가 전체적인 시스템을 정합성 있게 만들어서 그 자체 국내 역량을 키우느냐 하는 문제였기 때문에 자문을 할 때도 그런 점들을 강조를 했습니다. 그래서 예를 들었던 것이 우리나라 원례수출진흥회의와 같은 것은 대통령이 직접 주재하는 회의로서 그 매달 열렸고 매달 열릴 때마다 연초에 수립했던 상품별 지역별 그 계획이 있는데 수출 계획이 있는데 그것이 어떻게 진행되고 있는지를 상공부 장관이 보고를 했고 외무부 장관은 해외 시장 동향에 대해서 보고를 했습니다. 그리고 나서 거기에 이제 민간 대표들도 있었고 또 다른 공무원들도 있고 해서 여러 가지 이제 논의를 하면서 미처 예상하지 못했던 문제들이라든가 현안들을 하나하나씩 파악을 해가지고 그것을 고쳐나가는 이런 그 기제를 만들었는데 저희가 이제 도미니카 공화국 수출 진흥 정책에 대해서 할 때도 물론 수출 금융도 중요하고 수출 인력 양성도 중요하고 하지만은 더욱 중요한 것은 자체적으로 어떻게 문제가 뭔지를 파악을 하고 정부와 민간이 어떻게 협력을 해서 그 문제들을 풀어나가고 그 과정에서 역량을 배양하는 것이 중요하기 때문에 그런 점들을 강조를 했고요. 도미니카 공화국 같은 경우에는 이를 바탕으로 해서 매달은 아니지만 분기별로 만나는 회의를 이제 새로 만들어서 대통령이 직접 주재하는 형태로 추진을 하고 있습니다. 그래서 다시 한번 마무리를 하면서 강조를 하자면은 우리가 인력 개발이나 직업 능력 개발을 할 때 보통 교육 문제나 직업 훈련 문제로 한정해서 생각하기가 쉬운데 훨씬 더 중요한 거는 사회적 이동성을 어떻게 확보를 하고 또 이와 같은 인력 개발 문제가 산업과 무역과 같은 좀 더 범위가 넓은 정책 안에서 정책과 어떻게 연계를 가지고 추진되느냐 하는 그 점이 중요하다는 점을 다시 강조하고 싶습니다. 감사합니다.
한국말 저는 잘 못할 줄 알았는데, 그러니까 육군사관학교 교수 요원을 해서 그런지 한국말을 굉장히 잘하시는 것 같아요. 예. 한국 청중을 배려해 주셔서 감사드립니다. 다음은 실제적으로 국제 협력을 하시고 계시는 우리 한국국제협력단 코이카의 이종선 이사님 모시겠습니다. 시간 좀 10분으로 제한해 주실까요?
네, 권 교수님 감사합니다. 저도 한국말로 할 줄 알았으면 그냥 한국말로 준비를 해오는 건데 영어로 조금 준비를 해왔습니다. 한국말 했으면 더 편할 텐데 좀 미리 좀 알았으면. 네. Good afternoon. I am Jong-sun Lee from KOICA, Korea International Cooperation Agency. I really enjoyed the impressive presentations by the two renowned experts. Frankly speaking, I'm not an expert in this specific field, but based on my experience in international development, I would like to make some comments focusing on skills development in aid perspective. Korea is well known for its successful economic development, pillared on effective human resources development, which trained and provided qualified workforce matched with the industry's needs at each stage of national development plan. Such industries include value-added areas such as electronics manufacturing, which still marks up to 33% of the entire export made by Korea in 2010, and continuously contributing to the country's economic growth. Korea's case well describes the importance of demand-supply congruence in skills development. In fact, it is one of the fundamental issues that many developing countries are encountered with in reinforcing the quality of labor through skills development. In this regard, both the SABER workforce development conceptual framework and the Leonardo da Vinci program may well be applied to reduce the demand-supply gap or mismatch in the national and global labor market. Nevertheless, I would like to point out, based on KOICA's experience of assisting developing countries in skills development, that most developing countries face much more complex problems than just the demand-supply mismatch. Since the year 2000, about 15% of KOICA's total assistance was made for education and human resources development, such as basic education, vocational training, and higher education. And above 50% of this budget was supported for vocational training sector. Along these years, we learned that the skills development program in developing countries needs to consider and be supported by infrastructural and institutional aspect. The absolute shortage in number of vocational training facilities due to the lack of financial resources is one of the major problems. According to UNESCO statistics in 2008, only about 4% of secondary education facilities in West Asia and 16% in Africa officially provided skills development programs. Less infrastructure means less opportunity for potential students and less possibility to produce skillful manpower. This is why KRIVET's assistance in skills development still includes infrastructure development such as vocational training centers. As far as I know, Korea was one of the best model of Germany's technical assistance in vocational training in the past. In many developing countries, tools and methods to analyze the demands of the workplace are not well developed. Even if they do have critical analysis, whether they have an institutionalized system and qualified teachers to train and supply skilled technical workforce is a different issue. Taking such conditions into account, KRIVET assists programs on skills testing and certification system, which includes development of national occupational standards and modification of curriculum, as well as capacity building programs for trainers. In ODA perspective, what matters in skills development is not just how to produce competent manpower by providing the knowledge and techniques that the market is looking for, but how to enhance the institutional and social backbone that can bolster such development. In this regard, I think that the internationally discussed models and paradigms in skills development should reflect the situations of developing countries that are not quite similar to those of Europe or other developed economies. Closing my comment, I hope the two models introduced by Dr. Tan and Dr. Thoman can be modified or developed to suit the conditions of developing countries, enhancing employment at domestic level and also strengthening their competence in the global labor market. Then, KRIVET also be glad to apply these models in its aid programs in the future. Thank you.
네, 이종선 이사님 감사합니다. 원래 그 국제협력 경험을 바탕으로 토론해 주셨습니다. 마지막 그 토론자는 미스터 유셉 알리드입니다. 제가 이틀 전에 이 아프리카 델리게이션하고 회의를 했었는데 그때 사회자가 이 미스터 요셉 알리드를 닥터 알리드로 소개를 하니까 자기는 닥터가 아니고 미스터다. 그래서 제가 닥터 프레지던트는 없다. 미국에서는 대통령 부를 때 미스터 프레지던트 하지 독터 프레지던트 하지 않는다 했더니 아주 기분 좋아하셨어요. Well, you understand? Okay. Now you can listen Korean, yeah? Yeah. Well, you know, every presenter and every discussion, he or she talk about partners. Now we have an opportunity to listen from our partner from Africa. Please join me in welcoming African partner, Mr. Ali.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I prefer standing, sir, because I have a teaching background. Let me begin by thanking the Korean government for inviting us to this beautiful country And we have indeed enjoyed our stay here. I believe we'll go back with raised aspirations. Secondly, I would like to thank this forum for giving me this opportunity to share with you what Africa is about to benefit from the successes of Korea. Basically, I am to say something about a project which is being born. This project is called BEAR project. BEAR being an acronym for Better Education for African Rise. It is a 5-year project, and it is to take place in the SADC region. The funding is to come from Korea through UNESCO to fund this project in 5 African countries. These are SADC countries. The countries have been mentioned here. That's Zambia, Malawi, DR Congo, Namibia, Botswana. These are 5. Have I forgotten one? Yeah, that's 5. The problems that we have in the region are similar, and therefore the components of the project are also similar, except that we differ in terms of degrees of difficulties or degrees of impoverishment. Each country has got its own resources in terms of what it uses for its socio-economic development. However, we have a common problem, and this major common problem is teacher training, or training of the trainer. Let me go through components that this project will run in Malawi. I cannot give the components of all the countries, but I think I should be able to take you through the components that the project is to run in Malawi. Just for example, in Malawi, the BEAR project will run 3 components. But the first component will have 2 parts. The first part is to facilitate the provision of training of technicians in the construction sector so that physical infrastructural development is facilitated. Technicians in Malawi used to be trained at the Malawi Polytechnic. It's a polytechnic of the University of Malawi, but that training was phased out in the years between 2002 to 2005, which means that 12 technician programs have not been running since then. BEAR project is to run 1 out of the 12 programs to do with the construction so that we can have people that can assist us to develop our infrastructure. The second component, that's not second, but part of the first component, is to include the agricultural sector in the TVET curricula. In the past, we have not considered agriculture as part of our TVET provisions, but now that agriculture has played a part in our socio-economic development, BEAR project feels, and we strongly feel, that we need to include agriculture in our curricular provisions. And the second component is to establish TVET management information systems. And this is to enhance strategic planning, monitoring, and evaluation, and facilitate informed decision-making when you're implementing projects. At the moment, if you ask us how many teachers we have, it will be difficult to tell you. And if you ask us what the teachers need, it will be difficult for us to describe exactly what the teachers want. So we need to establish a system which can integrate our databases. We have scattered databases. One database is with the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology. The other database is with the Ministry of Labor. And TVETA, where I am, has got part of the database. And National Statistics have their own database. So what this project is going to do is to integrate the bases so that they can inform decision-making at any particular point of labor market. The third component is to establish a teaching staff career management system to facilitate recruitment, retention, and development of teachers. The moment teaching of technicians or technical teachers is done at a university college, that is the Malawi Polytechnic of the University of Malawi. There is a Department of Technical Education that is training teachers. But these teachers are trained for secondary schools, not for technical colleges. What they lack is the practical experience. So what this project will do is to ensure that the teachers that will be trained after this project or from at the time the project is implemented have both practical and pedagogical skills. Now, these are the components that are going to be run. But if I give you the components without giving you the context, it will not be very clear. Now, allow me, Mr. Moderator, to put these components into context. I'll take Malawi, for example, because I cannot talk about all the countries. Malawi is one of the least developed countries in the world. Actually, it is ranked 153rd out of 169 countries by the United Nations Development Report of 2010. It is densely populated with around 15 million people. The area is 1,118,500 square kilometers. 75% is rural, and 74% of the 75 in the rural depend on agriculture. It is predominantly importing and consuming, other than being producing and exporting. And our current effort is to become producing and exporting. Our exports are majorly tobacco, which accounts for 55–60% of our export. But this year, the market has been very bad due to anti-smoking lobby and other problems we had in the country. The second commodity, export commodity, is uranium, which started in 2009. And then we have coffee, tea, sugar, rice, etc., in small quantities. But now we have discovered that we have a lot of other resources, like a number of points where we can extract our uranium from. And then we have minerals like iron ore, we have bauxite, and then we have a lot of rare earths which can be put into use. Now the question now is that what direction should our education and training take without definition of the niche? So to us, what is important first is to define the niche, the direction. What is it that we are going to produce for export? And then we direct our resources to developing the human resource for, okay, 1 minute. I'm told that is 1 minute. So we want to define niche and then develop HRD and then implement a strategy. And we see that your Korean University of Technical Education can work with our university college, that's Polytechnic, to develop teachers. Let me run through. And then we have visited your Incheon Electronic High School and also the HRD Institute. These are very good schools, and we are now thinking of looking at possibilities of exchanging staff, your staff coming to Malawi, our staff coming here to learn. But we will explore possibilities for such kind of an arrangement. And then I've also learned that your KRIVET is very powerful into research, very powerful in research. So if there could be an exchange of fellows from here to Malawi and other SADC countries, and from other SADC countries to your research institute here to learn and for you to appreciate our situation. Since I have 1 minute, let me stop here. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention. Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator.
네, 감사합니다. Thank you so much. Now you understand. 감사합니다. 예? Okay, good, good. 예. 지금부터 이제 플로어가 질문할 수 있는 시간이고 이제 시간이 얼마 남지 않았기 때문에 간결하게 질문해 주시기 바랍니다. 예. 네. 예. 간단하게. 예. 소속을 밝히시고.
한국말로 하겠습니다.
예, 국산말로 해주세요.
예, 제가 지지난주에 그 컨퍼런스를 참여했는데 코리아 아프리카 데이였습니다. 많은 아프리칸 펠로우들이 제 질문은 그 미스 탕한테 갑니다. 많은 아프리칸 펠로우들이 그 월드뱅크 디렉션에 대해서 굉장히 불만족스러워한다는 생각을 갖게 됐는데 월드뱅크가 주로 초중등 교육의 투자를 권고하지 고등교육에 대한 투자를 조금 하지 않느냐, 등한시하지 않느냐, 동시에 너무 오버 에듀케이션 이슈에 집착하고 사적 수익에 대해서 그러니까 private return on investment에 대해서 너무 over emphasize 하고 social return에 대해서 underestimate 하지 않느냐 하면서 월드뱅크의 그러한 처방이 아프리카의 발전에 도움이 되느냐라고 많은 아프리카 펠로우들이 얘기했는데 그게 진짜인지 또 아직 그게 월드뱅크의 스탠드포인트가 퍼스펙티브인지 알고 싶습니다.
Please identify yourself.
Sorry, I'm Professor 상훈배 from 성균관 University.
Okay. 예, 또.
예, 임 교수님께 한 질문 드리고 싶은데요.
자기 소속.
예, 저는 칭화대학교에서 지금 석사 학생인 김석준이라고 합니다.
중국 칭화대학교.
예.
중국.
예.
칭화다시.
네네.
예.
네. 일제 시대 바로 후를 말씀하셔서 제가 갑자기 질문이 생각나서 질문드리는데. 그때 이제 미 군정기가 3년 동안 있었잖아요. 그때 이제 미국 교육 수입이 한국 교육 발전에 모멘텀을 실어줬다는 게 과연이 서포트가 될 수 있는 말인지 한번 여쭤보고 싶었습니다.
네, 고맙습니다. 아주 질문을 모범적으로 잘하고 있어요. 예. 보통 질문하라고 하면 연설하는데 오늘은 아주 모범생으로 왔어요. 예. 더 이상 없으면은. 우리 장성민 박사님은 계속 질문하는데 피곤하지 않으세요? 네, 하세요. 짧게만. 한국말로 짧게만 하세요. 짧게. 영어는 너무 잘하시는지 다 아니까.
두 가지 질문 드리겠습니다. 하나는 독일 대표님께, 하나는 아프리카 대표님께요. 그 직업교육을 한 국제 협력에 있어서 이 저개발 국가와 도와주려는 선진 국가에 많은 갭이 존재하는 것 같아요. 그래서 독일은 특히 듀얼 시스템, 이 도제제도 훈련이 자기들 대단히 자랑스럽게 생각하고 또 세계적으로 알려져 있는데 이걸 위해서 지난 수십 년 동안 후진국들을 많이 도와줬어요. 한국을 포함해서. 그래서 이 그 직업교육을 세계에 확산하고 도와주는 과정에서 어려움은 무엇이고 어떠한 전략이 가장 효과적이었는가 하는 점이고요. 그 다음에 아프리카에서 오신 대표님 전화를 몰라 죄송합니다마는 선진국 또는 한국을 포함해서 직업교육의 국제협력을 통해서 뭔가를 배우고 도움을 받기를 바라는데 어떻게 도와주고 어떤 도움을 원하는지 그리고 선진국에서 도와주는 것들 중에 합당하지 못한 것들은 무엇이 있는지에 관해서 말씀해 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
네, 아주 고맙습니다. Dr. 장성민, he's candidate for the international advisor in Phuket. I'm going to recommend him. Okay. Okay. 나중에 둘이 만나서 얘기 좀 하세요. 예. 다음 국제협력단에 질문 있으신 분 없어요? 예. 없으면은 질문 없죠? 예. 왜냐하면 제가 전에 월드뱅크에서 이 아프리카 직업교육 그 컨설턴트를 소개해달라고 그랬는데 그때 소개를 못 해줬어요. 그때 장성민 박사님 생각이 안 나서 못 해줬는데 지금 잘 됐어요. 지금 소개해드렸어요. 오케이, you got it? Yeah, good. 야, 그럼 지금부터 우리 이제 여기 발표자하고 토론자들께서 답변을 하도록 하겠습니다. You first? Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me just say the reason why I had asked Dr. Kwon to make a recommendation on a consultant from Korea is because there was a project that was recently approved for vocational, actually it's not vocational project, it's a skills development project in Ghana. And they were looking for a consultant to implement the project, one component of the project. Now I'm relating this little story because it is a little bit of a response to the question from the floor about what the World Bank's current position is with regard to the balance of investments in primary education and the rest of the education system, including skills development. I think the World Bank, as you know, is a country-driven model of business, meaning that we do have an overall amount for countries, and it is really a discussion between the country itself and the World Bank what kind of program it would like to finance with those resources. So while the World Bank may have views, the countries themselves also have certainly a very big influence on what gets financed. So with that, the Ghana Skills Project is, I think, a very new type of approach that we are taking. In the past, very little has been put into skills projects. Most of them were investing in facilities, infrastructure, with very limited connection to industry, to the demand for skills. And many of those projects actually we consider to be ineffective. So in today's design, we are looking to correct that connection. That's one change from the past. As for investing in post-primary levels, that in fact is increasing demand from countries to support those levels of the system. Indeed, 2 days ago, we had just in this building the launch of a study on higher education in the East Asia region, which really reflects a major shift in terms of the focus that we are putting on post-basic levels of education. Now, you mentioned Africa. I worked in Africa for many years at the World Bank, and in my time, we brought out 2 regional flagship reports. One is on secondary education, and the second one is on higher education. So in terms of laying the groundwork for engaging our partner countries, those pieces are actually putting forward precisely the case that you are making, that investing in education should be taken in a holistic way, that there should be some balance, but obviously we want it to be very much driven by the country, owned by the country. So that part of the process is taking time to mature, and in the case of a country like Ghana, we do have now an operation, and I'm no longer in the Africa region, but I'm told that there is a pipeline of analytical work that's going to build up to that. And just to close, it's very important to continue, dialogue at international fora, such as this one. 2 years ago, I believe, we had a conference in Africa and hosted by the African Development Bank, and the topic was about skills development. So, thank you.
Yeah, I thank you very much for the question, because after I focused quite much on the German case in my presentation, this somehow gives me the possibility to broaden my remarks to the international cooperation in VAT. And you asked for the challenges and difficulties in the experiences Germany faced during the decades of helping and assisting. On the one hand, I think it's necessary to mention that there is no single way just to adopt a dual system, the German dual system. You need really to find a solution that is to be found in discussion with a partner country, more an adaptation than an adoption. And it's also necessary to enable the partner to be in the driver's seat and to create a system that is efficient for their own interest. So we can give advice, but it's not as just a kind of as a kind of pattern which you have to take over 100% in order to be successful. Of course, we do have a strong relationship between the private sector and the public sector in Germany. Employability, or this is a target which exists for us since many years. So occupational competence, what I mentioned, or action-oriented, this is part of our understanding. And so I think this is also necessary to create this idea together with the partners, and also to find or to develop the institutions that are able to do the bargaining. Meaning, in general, you talk about a tripartite system, meaning that there's the government, there are the employers' associations, and the trade unions. And sometimes they are not in the same position, and they need to be enabled really to take their strong or to take their position and to bargaining. So you need also to do some institution building in this respect. And then maybe a third and last point is also something which is more on a national level. I think it's also necessary to have a coherent approach. Each country should have a coherent approach in regard to international cooperation. And this means there should be a good communication mechanism between all the ministries, for instance, involved. And if I look to Germany, it means it's the Ministry of Education, of Labor, of international affairs, foreign affairs, of economics, and of development cooperation, at least. So, and this also gives a certain challenge to the communication and decision-making process. Thank you.
미 군정기의 이제 정책에 대한 부분에 좋은 질문하셨는데, 좀 전체 성격을 보는 게 좋을 것 같습니다. 그러니까 미 군정기라고 하는 것은 기본적으로 세계 2차 대전으로 연결됐던 전체주의의 잔재들을 일본, 독일, 이탈리아 같은 나라에서 이제 그 해소를 하고 새로운 민주국가로 만든다는 게 기본 방향이었잖아요. 그러다 보니까 한국의 경우에도 좀 복합적인 측면이 있는데, 예를 들어서 임시정부라든가 이런 쪽, 먼저 독립하겠다는 이쪽은 막으면서 치안 쪽에서 친일파들 그대로 기용하고 한 이런 측면이 분명히 있습니다. 그런데 동시에 그 전체주의 잔재를 해소한다는 차원에서 이 교육이라든가 토지 쪽은 상당히 진보적이었습니다. 그래서 특히 토지 개혁 같은 거는 그 한국 내에서는 오히려 지주들이 반대를 해서 제대로 실시를 하지 못해 가지고 아서 번스 박사라는 분이 토지 개혁을 주창을 해서 미 군정기에는 어떻게 했냐면은 일본인들이 일제 시대에 소유하던 땅 이제 두고 간 거죠. 그 땅에 대해서 먼저 토지 개혁을 실시했고요. 그다음에 이제 북한에서 토지 개혁이 일어나고 그 남한 내부에서도 그에 대한 압력이 커지니까 49년에 전체적으로 토지 개혁을 실시하게 됩니다. 교육 쪽은 어떠냐면 조금 그 강도가 약한데 교육 쪽도 사실은 뭐 남녀 공학이라든가 이런 상당히 진보적인 요소들을 미군 정기에 도입을 하는데 교육 부분에 대해서는 워낙 우리나라의 교육열이 그때 높았고 사회적 이동성에 대한 어떤 기대라든가 이런 부분들이 있었기 때문에 저는 미군 정기에서 그렇게 안 했어도 상당 부분 됐을 거라고 생각을 합니다. 하지만 분명히 기여한 부분이 있습니다.
Thank you so much for your questions. You have asked what we don't like in terms of help and what we would like to get from the developed nations. What we would not like is that sort of help that will keep us where we are, still depending on the help from developed countries. The kind of help we need is skills development. Firstly, we need to define our direction, the direction in which we can grow. And then we need to come up with a human resource development strategy. And after that, we need to implement that strategy. Any components that can go into this structure, they are very welcome for us. But we also are mindful of the fact that literacy is a prerequisite to socio-economic development. So a lot of donors these days are assisting primary or basic education, which is very good. But that has got to be supported with a boost in the productive sector. Thank you so much.
네, 고맙습니다. 그 국제협력, 그러니까 직업교육을 위한 국제협력 이 세션은 굉장히 유익했던 것 같습니다. 아메리카, 유럽, 아시아 대륙에서 발표자와 토론자들이 와서 아주 어떻게 하면은 서로 협력할 수 있냐라는 걸 진지하게 논의한 자리가 됐고, 특히 이 청중 여러분께서 협력해 주셔서 좋은 세션이 됐던 것 같습니다. 여기에서 논의되고 또 우리 집행탄 박사가 지적했듯이 어떻게 하면 이 갭을 줄이냐, how to narrow the gap between the continents, between the countries is the key issue of the today. So in that way, we may to bridge the gap. 갭을 갖다가 이렇게 없애서 다 같이 잘 사는 나라가 그런 세계를 만들 수 있을 것 같습니다. I thank you so much for presenters and discussants. Your presentation and your discussion will devote to enhance the quality of human life by narrowing the gap. I thank you so much.
네, 수고해주신 권대봉 교수님과 연사 토론자분들께 다시 한번 감사드립니다. 이것으로 세 번째 세션을 마치겠습니다.